Features now.
Yeah, right. Okay, and then that just sits over.
At the end of last week's episode, we showed you how we plan on gluing in some of the plugs into a few spots on the planks. This week, we'll follow this plank on and off the boat many times. We do our best through the freezing temperatures to get this bent on and fit onto Arabella, and later, we'll start getting ready for some big changes to the boathouse.
Piece of glove.
Well, I am back in the boathouse. I've been fighting a bit of pneumonia here. A little frustrating when you know you're sick and you go to the doctors time and time again and tell them that you have walking pneumonia. And none of them believe you until you demand an x-ray. Anyways, back on my feet. Steve is going to be doing some errands around here today. Keira and I are going to try to fit the plank, at least on the boat. We're going to start with the nib and then we're probably going to have to steam in the end. But it is bitter cold today, so might be moving a little slow, especially with this thing. But I'm on antibiotics and kicking it hard, so let's see what we can do today. It took us pretty much the whole day just to get the nib end figured out. The temperature didn't help speed things up much, and it certainly didn't do any favors for my pneumonia either. But we really needed to get this plank on the boat, so even though I was still feeling pretty run down, Keira and I kept going the next day working towards the stern end. Keira and I got this mostly clamped on. We got the stern clamped down as much as we can, just so that we can get it close, and we're gonna have to steam that now. So just like we did the last couple of planks, we're gonna steam that so we can get it kind of close to the shape that we need, so it's not so much of a hard time when we're putting it on for the final test. So we're gonna take this plank off one more time. So we steamed this for about an hour. Keira and I took turns watching the fire while we were steaming this thing, and actually it started snowing, and then somebody had an accident right in front of the house. They clipped a couple signs and tore up the entire front of their car, so we had cops and everything around here. Kind of fun. Anyways, but this stern over here, just like we did for the bottom one, we're basically just steaming in close to the shape that it needs to be so that we can then get it close once we are doing the final fit, and don't have to tweak it just quite as much. So you can see there's a little bit of a gap here. It's not really that big of a deal. It's just getting us close to what we need, and that way that'll make the final fit a lot easier to do. So we're gonna let this sit. Hopefully it doesn't freeze too bad. Definitely will freeze, but there's no way for us to get the bag off the board right now without taking all the clamps off, which I don't want it to cool down without being clamped in, so this is how we're gonna leave it. It's not a big deal. And then we'll make sure to give it a good oiling afterwards, because steaming definitely dries them out. So I'm gonna go inside, take care of my pneumonia, and sit by the fire. The plank is set overnight now, so we got to take that off. Steve is just finishing up the snow blowing from the snow we got last night. He was up all night kind of bumping this off. So I'm going to take this off and start to shape the plank and put it in place and see if we can get this thing where it needs to be today, and maybe tomorrow we can start fastening it off. Got a little change of pace for today. It is supposed to be a high of like 22 Fahrenheit today, which is pretty significantly below freezing. So working out in the boathouse and getting planks to bend and move is going to be a little bit of a challenge today. The other thing is we need to get the boathouse roof figured out before we go down to Costa Rica. So we have mentioned that we had some issues with the building inspector showing up. Basically, they're not very happy about the plastic that we have on the boathouse. It's not fireproof. Anyways, so what we decided to do is make a bow shed trusses, which we were going to do anyways before we left for Costa Rica, because what we have on right now is not steep enough and it's not shedding the snow. So we're going to make bow shed trusses, and then on top of that we're going to put a fire retardant membrane, which is basically like a FarmTech covering. Thank you, FarmTech. They have been awesome. They made a custom one for us that is getting delivered sometime today. They have been fantastic to work with. Thank you, Georgia. So anyways, we're gonna get that basically draped over, and that gets cinched down on the ends and on the sides. So what we need to do today is work on the trusses, which is what you see behind me here. We made a jig, so we're going to put together some bow shed trusses, which are basically put together with, we got some furring strips that are gonna be doubled up to bend across an arc with blocking in between them. So there's gonna be 2 layers of furring strips, a block, and then 2 more layers of furring strips. And this is very typical. So we're gonna have double the amount of trusses now. So they're gonna be 6 feet on center, and then, or 5 foot on center, and then have the thicker layer of covering on top of it. So since it's gonna be too cold today to work outside and have the glue set, we are going to attempt to bring this inside and glue inside. They're gonna be glued and screwed together to add some strength. But basically, we'll see if we can accomplish this. While we were working, we got the delivery of the new outer membrane from FarmTech. We'll get this laid out and installed in next week's episode. There are a few more things we need to take care of first.
Joys of working in the winter. The glue needed to set on these, so we had to do them in the house. So these are double laminations for each side of the truss that have some glue in between them, and then have 2 screws above them to lock them in where the blocks are. Each one of these is one side of the truss, and then they'll be gusseted together up at the top, and we'll make up a full truss.
Still not super fast. No. Let's see what we got anyway, a little bit here. Go ahead.
So this is the Chrysler Flathead 6 that we got to power our new thicknesser. It's been sitting around for a little while, but we were pretty confident that between Grandpa and Joe, we would have a working engine at some point soon.
Go ahead.
Because when you hit it, I hear a little like poof, poof, poof.
Yeah, you can hear it good on this one.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, much more, but now I can hear it on those two where
a little bit.
I wasn't hearing it at all before.
Yeah, well, if they were, when the engine was stopped the last time,
Yep.
evidently those two were up
Yep.
and they froze there.
They just stayed there.
And now that we turned it over, the tappets went down, but the valve stayed up. The tappet is the one on the bottom that comes up and pushes it up and down.
Okay.
And that's adjustable.
Yeah.
If you've seen the little nut on it.
Yeah.
And you put a feeler gauge in there when it's running.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the guy said it ran before.
Yeah. Yeah, he said he ran it for a long time, and then it sat, and then he said that a guy had done a bunch of work to it, and doesn't know if they put new pistons in, or if they just bored it out, or exactly what they did.
Right.
But they did a little bit of work to it, and then it was used for a little while, and then it sat again.
Then my guess is we just got dirt underneath them valve heads.
It just needs to fire for a little while.
And soak it and fire it and then get it running and get them running up and down and bust that little bit of rust as it comes back down. And they're probably not snapping down the way they should. Because we're turning over a little slow.
Yeah.
And if we get them working so that they come down.
Yeah.
You do that. We got Probably ain't got much section to draw this in. Ready?
She's smoking.
Fired.
Yep, I'm sure 80.
Yeah. The 80 and the 50, huh?
Trying to go through the oil.
Yeah.
Maybe not today, but we'll get this thing running soon. That evening, I put a coat of paint on the plank, and once that dries tomorrow, it's time to hang it on the boat for the last time. The next morning, we got the inside and outside of the boathouse ready to take all the plastic off. Then, we headed out to the woods in search of a new and taller mast for the roof.
All right.
Which tree do you want to murder?
Something rather straight.
So I think the best candidate might be that oak over there.
The one halfway up the hill.
Yeah.
Instead of that oak tree, we decided to go with this big pine over here. This thing got damaged by the backhoe going in and out, so we decided we'd take it down anyways.
So if we cut it just below a honky wonk here, that should be long enough.
With our mast ready to haul back, we also grabbed what was left of one of the stumps we cut up for the knees. This will serve as a new dead man. Basically, an anchor for the cables holding up the roof.
That'll make a perfect dead man.
Grandpa kept working on the engine, and once Steve and I got back with the mast and the dead man, we got out the dolphinite and put the plank on the boat.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah. It's gonna be like this for a couple days till we get everything put back together.
Yep. So one of the cool parts of this project is that people see us or talk about us in town or on the videos, and people really want to help. So we had a neighbor down the road who just took down this beautiful white oak in his backyard and didn't really know what to do with it, didn't really want to cut it up for firewood. It's a perfect butt logs. So he was up the road speaking with some merchant called Devin Lane that fixes chainsaws and things like that, and Steve goes there pretty often, and they suggested that he get in touch with us. So these two logs are really, really nice and straight, very clear, and they'll probably end up becoming the rest of our bending stock for the rest of our frames. So we are milling one more time this winter, mostly because we had tent caterpillars these last couple of years and a lot of the oaks died back there. So instead of letting them just sit out there and rot, we figured we'd put them to some good use. So we cleaned up a little bit back in the wood yard over there, took down a bunch of logs there. So we'll do one final cut, And one another cool project that we've got going on, we're not really taking care of it, but we are providing the lumber for it. Our friend is a painter, and she just built herself a studio, and we are going to provide some beautiful red oak logs to become hardwood flooring for inside her studio. So we're really excited about that. So even the red oak out back is getting used. So this next week we're basically cleaning up for getting these guys all set up to mill. We're trying to get the boathouse all fixed and cleaned up before we go off to Costa Rica, and kind of just wrapping things up because we're going to be gone for a good 2.5 weeks down there, and we're just going to have Christy coming in and out over here and checking on things and making sure everything's doing all right here while we're gone. So we have a lot to do before then.